Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing a video talking about one of the most iconic firearms on the planet, nicknamed the right arm of the free world, especially in this configuration, and that is the FAL. Now this one specifically is one of the Century Arms built. I believe they call it the R1A1, so it's more of a L1A1 style gun, so very much in the inch pattern, although there are some anomalies in there. Being built by Century Arms, probably not terribly shocking, although this is not my first soiree into the Century Arms built guns. I do have a C308, which is one of their Set Me C kit builds. That one has been phenomenal, although I know that that's not always the case. This one, however, has been a little bit more of a mixed bag, although I think generally positive overall. So this one, just I guess as an overview, this is a 20-inch barrel variant. That is one of the more common ones, at least early on in the time of the FAL. Now, I know there are going to be people who get upset at me saying FAL instead of FAL because it is an abbreviation, or excuse me, an acronym. However, I also say OG, so I guess come at me. Now this one also just has the carry handle still installed. Not all variants have that, and then a lot that did come with that were cut off while being used in various conflicts. But other than that, this thing is pretty basic FAL, and we'll go over some of the more specific controls on this thing a little bit later. Now, I'm not going to be giving a history of the FAL. I'm not going to be talking about, when and where it was used, other than to say that the reason this was nicknamed the right arm of the free world is that over 90 countries adopted this as their main infantry rifle across the world. The United States was supposed to be on that list. However, we decided to go with the M1A, or excuse me, M14. That is what it is. However, this is what a lot of the world standardized on. However, very few, at least first world countries, continue to use these today. They were built all over the place. This one, the lower here is Australian, if I understand correctly. However, they were built all over the place. If you want to know more, there are better videos on the internet talking to you about the history of the FAL and the various configurations. This is just going to be talking about this specific version, talking about my experience with it and kind of what my thoughts are of the platform overall. Now, I know that this may not be the best sample to be able to gauge an entire style of gun off of, being the Century Arms built one. However, I think that this is at least a good enough representation of the type to be able to get at least some level of understanding and familiarity with it. Let's just go ahead and run down the specifics of how this thing is set up. We'll go from the muzzle to the stock. So up front here, we do have a muzzle brake. This has 3 chambers kind of in all the 3, 6, 9, and 12 o'clock positions. A lot of the ones that were used previously in places like Rhodesia, they had basically a little clamp-on thing to block off the bottom ports. That way you're not kicking up dust, and it also acts more as a compensator. This thing seems to work really well, though, at least as a muzzle brake. The felt recoil is greatly diminished over a lot of the other .308 battle rifles I've shot. And given that this is a 20-inch barrel, I'm not dealing with a ton of muzzle flash off of this. I don't know if you had the same muzzle device on a shorter barrel, if you would run into those issues. I can say, however, that that is not an issue that I personally have run into. The 20-inch barrel length is, you know, very, very long compared to a lot of the guns that I'm used to running in this modern era. However, again, at least in the early days of the battle rifles, this was the standard. Now, moving back, we do have a little bit of a sling swivel here. This almost seems more set up like a stacking swivel, just the way it's kind of open, but this is your front sling swivel. It does rotate from one side to the other. I obviously am not using a sling on this because of the way the stock is set up on this, but that is what that is. You do have an adjustable gas piston up here on the front, and for those of you who don't know, this is a short stroke gas piston gun. Right now, I just have it set to the standard gas setting, and then there's also an off position on some guns, specifically designed for rifle grenades. This is also where you disassemble the gas piston, so when you rotate this to a certain position, it'll allow you to remove everything from the front side here. Not going to go into that in this video. This video will probably be long enough as is, so I'll let you guys find out other videos if that's something you're interested in. Now, moving back here, the front sight is a weird one in that, based on the research I've done, and I am far from a FAL expert. The fact that I call it a FAL should be a good indication of that. However, all the research that I've done has told me that this style of front sight is a metric style front sight. The fact that these are not open here on the side, the little wing protectors here. However, again, I know for a fact that this is an inch gun. So that's kind of a weird thing. I don't know if it's anachronistic or if there were certain configurations of inch FALs that use this. If you guys know, please put that in the comments down below. The front sight is elevation adjustable. When I got this, it was stuck in the all the way down position. Actually, I guess this is as good a time as any to talk about. When I first got this, there were a couple weird quirks going on with this thing. I got this thing used through the gun store where I work. And I have a feeling the person who sold it to us just ran into these issues, didn't want to address it, figured they might as well cut their losses and sell it. I, however, kind of took a look at this thing, realized what was going on, and figured it'd probably be pretty straightforward to fix them all, and it was. I was able to get the front sight unstuck so I could actually zero this, because this thing was far from zeroed elevation-wise out the gate. Moving back, one of the real benefits to a gun like the FAL is its adjustable gas setting here. So you can adjust this gas setting for the type of ammo you're shooting, the environment that you're shooting in, theoretically if you're running a suppressor on it. Now this one seems to run best almost all the way closed, so I don't have a ton of room of adjustment as far as like my operating window. However, depending on how the gun is set up, you might have more or less adjustment. Overall, the amount of clicks in there are, you know, there's a lot of them. However, in my opinion, or in my experience here, that usable range is a pretty small one because I can't tap it off much more than I am at right now. However, I could open it up a whole lot more, but I'm not going to get much benefit from that unless I'm in an extremely cold situation. or if I have, you know, just a lot of fouling or something that's keeping this thing from working. Fouling, foul. Anyway, the handguard here, this is a pretty standard polymer handguard. There are some aftermarket options now if you wanted to attach lights, lasers, anything like that to this. However, none of them really jumped out and grabbed me. Not all of them seem very robust. I know there are some better options available in like the metric style game. However, in the inch style, we're severely limited, at least from the research I did. I did talk to a couple companies to see about cross compatibility, and basically they said, well, we can't guarantee that it'll work. It may work, but we can't guarantee it. And because of that, I just decided I didn't want to mess with it, just to be completely frank there. Again, we do have a carry handle here. The story goes that in Rhodesia, a fired shell got basically bounced off one of these and went into the shooter's eye, and the soldier lost his eye, and as a result, soldier or mercenary, not sure what it was, lost his eye, and so they started chopping the carry handles off their guns. I'm not using this in combat conditions, so I haven't run into that issue. Usually when it's stowed, it stays stowed. Again, I'm not using it in combat though. Crazy things can happen in those circumstances. I do sometimes just carry it around on the range just to be, just for the memes, I guess, with the carry handle. However, mostly that's there for aesthetics, and I think just looks appropriate on the top of this gun. Now, the dust cover on these is, I guess, almost reminiscent of like an AK dust cover. You've got your ejection port cut out, and then it's just a thin piece of sheet metal that goes around the top, or at least I'm assuming it's sheet metal. I would be shocked if it's milled, but this piece of sheet metal just slides in. So if I disassemble this thing quickly here, this just slides off, then revealing the bolt assembly underneath there. You can get replacements for this, like there are railed dust covers. So if you wanted to mount optics or something like that, you could. I may do that at some point, but if I do, it probably won't be with this FAL. If I ever get another FAL, maybe. But this FAL, again, especially in the 20-inch variant, just seems more appropriate to leave in its, I guess, GI configuration. Now, one of the other cool things about some of the inch FALs is that they have this folding charging handle here. So for those of you who don't know, the charging handle on a FAL is non-reciprocating, i.e. every time it fires, it does not move back and forth. It stays in this frontward position. So this keeps it a lot flatter. A lot of the metric FALs out there have almost like a little knob style charging handle. And theoretically, it could catch on gear or pull the gun out of battery without you necessarily being aware of it. This reduces that likelihood. However, it does also make it somewhat harder to get to, especially when I'm wearing gloves. I have found that it is not always super positive to go for the charging handle, as it would be just, you know, hitting a slide lock or something like that. If I'm trying to use the charging handle to clear malfunctions or anything like that, that can be a little bit more difficult. It is possible to retrofit these, and you do see some metric FALs that have been converted to having a side charger, or excuse me, a folding charging handle, but it's not something that's necessarily period correct, I guess, as far as my understanding. Now, one of the other interesting things about the inch FALs is the magazine release. Now, I'll cut in a better picture so you guys can actually see here. But the magazine release on a metric FAL is usually just this little tiny button here, kind of just the rock and lock style. Sometimes you would use your index finger. With this one, on the inch FALs, the bar comes all the way across, so I really can do like an AK style pinch and rock out method. Again, I'll show you a close-up picture of this. I know some of the ones that Forgotten Weapons have covered have had this, and this definitely makes the ergonomics a little bit nicer for me, especially since I'm used to AK ergonomics. That is just a really natural thing for me. Also, it kind of shields the bolt catch. So there is a bolt catch on the FAL here. It's this little lever piece. Pushing it up obviously locks it open. Again, being non-reciprocating, I can push the charging handle back forward. And then if I push down on that, it'll release the bolt. Don't want to do it now for noise against the microphone. Well, maybe we will. Hold on. That'll release the bolt back forward. Of course, I can also run the charging handle and release the bolt if I have either an unloaded or a loaded mag or no magazine in there. Now, one of the other things that this thing came configured as is no last shot hold open. Now, at first I thought that was weird. I did some digging, and apparently a lot of the English Dominion countries, I guess, did not have last shot hold open on their FALs because they didn't want the bolt locking open in sandy conditions, dirty conditions, whatever else, and getting that dirt and debris into the action, causing it to have malfunctions. So they eliminated that. I did, however, make that start to work. I have a video on that if you want to look that up. But basically, I was able to reactivate the last shot hold open because, again, for my usage, that doesn't really matter to me, and I'd rather have it lock open. Again, possibly anachronistic, but I'm okay with that. And then for what it's worth, the other thing that I quote-unquote fixed was the gas regulator was extremely loose when I first got this. So when I would be shooting, it would self-adjust to where it would stop running properly. Again, part of the reason I think the person previous to this, to me, sold it. However, again, in that same video, I show basically putting more tension on that spring and making this thing stay put. And it has definitely stayed put through the 500 or 600 rounds that I have through this. So for what that's worth. Now, the pistol grip on this version of the FAL is the more traditional, very steep angled pistol grip. So I'll be honest, I'm not in love with the grip angle here. It does work in this specific configuration, being the longer configuration, but a lot of us modern shooters are used to a more vertical pistol grip, and I think I might prefer that just because of my shooting style. But this works just fine, and honestly, when I'm shooting this thing on the clock or just doing drills with it, I don't really notice that grip angle being an issue. And it does put your thumb in a great position to activate the safety. The safety on this thing is very oversized, which makes it very, very positive. I can actually actuate it while it's in my shoulder. Now this one obviously would originally have 3 positions. This one just has the safe and fire. It has a little dangus preventing me from going to auto, and then obviously it doesn't have a full auto fire control group in there even then, so it wouldn't work no matter what, so for what that's worth. And then moving back here, the rear sight, it is adjustable for elevation on the fly, so for once you get it zeroed, obviously you can adjust it for your elevation by basically sliding it forward on this little track. And then windage is actually adjusted by some screws. If you're used to the dovetail system that Loophole has, where you adjust the windage in the back by basically setting this thing and tightening screws from either side, very, very similar principle here. And then the rear sight does flip down, so if you are running optics, you could get your rear sight out of the way. I, however, find that folding down to be an issue because there are times pull this thing out of the range bag, pull up to do my first drill, and I have no rear sight. So it is what it is. This one has only the one aperture. I know this is not the only rear sight configuration on FALs, but that's what this one has, and it works well enough when I make sure that it's up. With the iron sights on this thing, I can consistently get about 3 MOA with just standard M80 ball style ammo or my own hand loads. I could probably throw an optic on here and get it a little bit better. However, FALs were never known for accuracy. So for me, 3 to 4 MOA is perfectly acceptable as it was at the time. My C308, for what it's worth, can shoot much better groups than that. And then back here, the stock is very simple. There's no sling mounting options here. I might drill into this and put a rear sling swivel or something just so I can mount a sling if I wanted to, or I might do like that M16 or like A2 sling adapter from like Blue Force Gear, like I have on one of my shotguns, just so I could put a sling on here. I just like having slings on rifles, so for what that's worth. And then for disassembly, there are a couple, again, variations of this on FALs. This one, the lever comes up towards the top, so I pull back on that little ball and it rocks open. And then if I wanted to, I've got this big screw that goes through the whole thing that I can then remove to completely disassemble the top and bottom portions of this to make cleaning and maintenance a lot easier. Trigger on this thing is nothing to write home about. If I can remember correctly, it's probably about a 6-pound trigger. Not great, but definitely not bad. Again, this is where it really edges out over the C308 or HK91 style guns. Trigger's a lot better. And last but not least, the magazines. So one of the things that I read about inch FALs is, and for, I guess, those who don't know, inch FAL mags and metric FAL mags are shaped differently. Basically, the locking lug on the front is significantly larger on the inch pattern mags. What I read was that inch FALs will shoot metric or inch magazines. However, this came with 1-inch mag, 1 metric mag. The metric mags, and I've tried several metric mags now, do not work at all. This thing will only work with inch mags. The metric will lock in, but after the first round, it kind of like pushes the magazine down out of the way, so it stops being able to strip rounds off the top of the magazine. Wouldn't be an issue if inch FAL mags were easier to get. They are not easy to get. Pretty much all of the FAL mags that I have for this are all surplus magazines in various conditions, I guess. And I have found that with a full 20-round load on them, they don't always like to strip that top round off reliably, so I've found myself kind of downloading to 18 rounds. Again, not ideal, but just kind of working with what I got. If you're looking for something that has readily available mags, the metric mags are by far the most common because DSA uses metric mags. A lot of the commercial new production magazines are all going to be metric as well. It may be possible to convert it. I've seen people talk about that, but it's definitely not something that would be straightforward or easy to do for the just general end user like you or I. Can't really see in there very well, but it failure to feed on the very last round of the magazine. Second to last round of the magazine. So what has my overall experience been with this Century Arms FAL? Overwhelmingly, it's been positive. I have had more malfunctions with this than, say, I have the HK91 style C308. However, from an end user perspective, this is a lot nicer to use. The adjustable gas piston makes this thing significantly softer shooting. I like the ergonomics of this gun a lot better, not having to reach way up front and defeat the rollers to be able to unlock the bolt like on the C308 or HK91s. That's always a pain. The safety I can actually use while it's in my shoulder, unlike the HK style. This one having a last shot hold open, again, kind of anachronistic, but a lot of the FALs you get today will have that. Is definitely a nice thing to have. And still a reliable system, but where the C308 or HK91 style guns beat this out is reliability and accuracy. The reliability on these is fine, but that roller delay system is just significantly more robust and the guns themselves have a tendency to be more accurate. And I think that's probably why you see like the G3 style guns still in service with first world nations, and you don't see many FALs still in use with first world nations. In fact, I was watching some footage from some UN troops in somewhere in Africa, and it was Portuguese troops, and they're running around doing like room clearing with G3s, like with the, I think it's the A2 or A3 collapsible stocks. Really, the only time you see FALs is in the hands of soldiers whose governments couldn't afford anything different, because these are kind of what they were given for one reason or another. Now, again, this is still no slouch, and with the availability of certain upgrades, these things can be pretty stinking viable as a modern option. However, you know, again, there's little weird things about reliability that just make these things not the best. And especially, you know, for example, Grantham just did his ICE test video, and in it he mentioned his DSA FAL, his full-size one at least, being out of commission for whatever reason. He didn't elaborate further on, unfortunately. And a lot of people I know with the DSA guns have run into one issue or another. And I may or may not, well, I know I will run into the issues at some point if I shoot this thing enough. However, with 308 ammo, getting 500 to 600 rounds through this thing was tough enough. Now, obviously this thing is currently unpainted. I do plan on painting this thing at some point. I probably won't do the Rhodesian brushstroke. I think that's been overplayed, and I also don't want to be simping for racists. But I will probably do some sort of like jungle camo. Playing Far Cry, the new Far Cry has definitely gotten my interest in FALs more reinvigorated, I guess. So if you have experience with the FAL, I think a lot of you guys out there have this, especially if you're watching this video. Definitely let me know what your experience has been, especially if you have something to compare it to like an HK91 or other battle rifle option out there, because obviously this is just a sample of one, and again, may not be the best example to use to describe the type. So again, let me know what your experience has been. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and throw that in the comment section down below. Try to get back to you as quick as I can. I want to say thanks to my patrons for helping to make a video like this one possible. Without their support, these videos would be much more difficult to make, just because, again, 308 ammo is not something readily available right now, and it's definitely not cheap. The vast majority of the ammo I shot through this were all hand loads, just to make it economically viable for me to do so. So because of that, I post all my content over there early. We do some exclusive content. We do live streams, all that kind of stuff. And I'm definitely in the year 2022 here trying to do more to reward patrons over there. But anyway, if any of that stuff sounds interesting, or you just want to financially support the channel, definitely check that out. But with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. Nice. All of them in the A zone. That's a 288, 104 first shot.
I'll take that.
That's not bad.
First shot could be quicker, but that's just reps.
So
irons.
First shots through a FAL. What are your first thoughts?
You know, it was smoother recoiling than I thought it would be. I haven't shot a lot of battle rifles. I'm used to bolt actions in bigger calibers if I'm shooting other than 5.56. So, I mean, if you put shoulder behind it and recoil control, it's not too bad. The trigger's definitely a little weird when we're used to running Geisleys and stuff. The first one I ran, I didn't quite let the trigger out far enough because I'm used to a shorter trigger, but...
And it's not as tactile.
Right. Yeah, it's a little, it's not quite as, you don't get that, it's not like, the Geisleys almost have like a forced, like they kind of help push your finger out. This one doesn't. It's just something to get used to. And I think the other big thing is, so many of us guys these days shooting ARs or C-clamping it, but you can't do that with irons on this.
Yeah.
So just, you know, running your thumb to the side, but still making sure you're pulling back enough to actually control the recoil. But yeah, it's cool.
Cool.